Welcome to Kiss and Chapters, where every story begins with a spark and ends with a swoon. If you love heart-fluttering romances, unexpected twists, and characters you'll root for, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so I can keep bringing you more sweet, emotional, and unforgettable stories. Let's fall in love with every chapter, together. Chapter 1. Oops, wrong dimension. If there's one thing they never tell you in the Galactic Defense Academy, it's that teleportation devices are temperamental little gremlins. 1 second I was in the middle of a glorious victory, standing on top of a smoking pirate ship, hair perfectly windswept, adrenaline singing in my veins. The next second, everything went white. When my vision returned, I was standing knee-deep in what could only be described as the universe's ugliest puddle. The air smelled like burnt rubber and despair. A half-eaten traffic cone floated by. Somewhere in the distance something groaned, low, hungry, and not at all friendly. I glanced at my wrist console. Coordinates, unknown. Atmosphere, breathable. Energy level, 60%. My powers had never been below 90. I felt like someone had replaced my sleek starcruiser with a rusty bicycle. Oh, perfect, I muttered, kicking the puddle. The teleporter dropped me in a garbage swamp. Again. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I spun around, palms sparking with a faint violet glow. 3 humanoid figures shuffled toward me. They were slow, clumsy, and very obviously decomposing. Hello. I tried. They answered by moaning louder and breaking into a lopsided sprint. Right, I said, raising my hand. Zombies. I blasted them with a pulse of Nivaran energy, sending them tumbling back like ragdolls. Easy enough, except the blast left me just a bit dizzy. Yeah, 60% power was going to be a problem. That's when I saw him. He came barreling out from behind a burnt-out car, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in battered black gear that had seen better days. His eyes flicked from the zombies to me, then to the faint glow still dancing around my hands. What the hell are you doing? He barked, grabbing my arm. You trying to get yourself killed? Excuse me. I yanked free. I just saved you. I was fine. He scowled. Now move before more show up. I watched as he pulled out a battered machete and finished off the zombies I'd already neutralized. Very macho. Very unnecessary. Also, mildly impressive. You're welcome, I called after him. He stopped, gave me a once-over, and frowned deeper. What are you supposed to be? Some kind of apocalypse cosplayer? Cosplayer? I tilted my head. Is that an earth insult? He blinked. You're seriously telling me you're not from around here? I smirked. You could say that. Another groan sounded. More zombies, probably drawn by all the noise. He muttered something under his breath and jerked his head. Fine. You saved my life. You can tag along. But if you slow me down, I'm leaving you behind. Charming, I said, falling into step beside him. What's your name, local? Axel. I smiled. Dana. And just so we're clear, I'm not tagging along with you. You're tagging along with me. He shot me a flat look that said he regretted letting me live already. I returned it with my brightest, most unbothered grin. Somewhere deep down, though, I felt that little spark, the one that always meant trouble. And I had the funny feeling that surviving this world was going to be a lot more complicated than I thought. Chapter 2, you call this shelter? If I'd known Axel's safe house was going to be an abandoned supermarket, I might have taken my chances with the zombies. This is it? I asked, stepping over a pile of overturned shopping carts. He ignored me and disarmed a tripwire at the entrance, made from what looked like fishing line, an empty paint can, and a bell. Keeps the scavengers out. Adorable, I said, giving the place a slow once-over. On Nivaran, even garbage dumps have proper force fields and automated defense drones. You have a paint can. He gave me a side glance that said he wasn't sure whether to be offended or impressed. You're welcome to leave. I grinned. And miss the fun of fixing this dump? Not a chance. He grunted something that might have been a warning, or a curse, before heading toward the back. I followed, ducking under another one of his security systems, a broom propped against the wall with a string attached to a pile of metal pans. The supermarket had been stripped bare of anything useful. Empty shelves, smashed glass, a faint smell of something I didn't want to identify. The roof leaked in 2 places, Right, I said, cracking my knuckles. Let's do some upgrades. Don't, Axel started, but I was already moving. I summoned a burst of Nivaran energy into my palms and zapped the broken lighting fixtures, restoring a faint but steady glow. A sweep of my hand cleared away the mold and grime from the floors. With a flick of my fingers, the leaking roof tiles shifted into place and sealed themselves tight. Axel froze mid-step, eyes wide. What the hell was that? Basic home maintenance, I said with a shrug. Took me less than 5 minutes. You're welcome. He walked past me muttering, great. Now the lights will attract every freak in the area. Ungrateful, I muttered back. Still, I noticed him testing the repaired door hinges, checking the sealed roof with a skeptical touch, as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. By nightfall, the supermarket almost looked cozy. Well, cozy for a half-ruined apocalypse building. I'd even rearranged some of the shelving into a sleeping area, complete with makeshift curtains for privacy. Here, I said, tossing him a salvaged blanket I'd cleaned with a quick energy pulse. For your beauty sleep. You need it. He caught it without looking at me. We're setting some ground rules. Rules. I flopped down onto my blanket, propping my chin on my hand. Oh, this is going to be good. 1. Don't wander off without telling me. 2. Don't touch my weapons. 3. Don't use your freak magic without warning me first. It's not magic. It's advanced alien tech woven into my biology. Sure, he said flatly. For, if you see trouble you run. No hero stunts. I smirked. You're adorable when you pretend to be in charge. He scowled, turning away to check the door again. Just, try not to get us killed. Relax, Axel, I said, stretching out. If anything, I'm the reason you're still breathing. He didn't answer, but I caught the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth before he disappeared into the shadows. I lay back, staring at the flickering ceiling lights I'd restored. Somewhere in the distance, a howl echoed across the ruined city. For the first time since arriving on this strange planet, I didn't feel completely alone. And that scared me way more than the zombies. Chapter 3, Grocery Run from Hell. By sunrise I had a mission. And by mission, I mean forcing Axel to stop living off canned beans and expired protein bars. You can't keep eating that sludge, I told him, watching in horror as he popped open yet another dented tin. It's food, he said around a mouthful. It's an insult to the concept of food. I crossed my arms. We're going shopping. He gave me a look like I'd suggested we take a scenic tour through the zombie capital of Earth. Shopping? In case you missed it, we're in the apocalypse. Grocery stores aren't exactly open. Then we'll open one ourselves, I said cheerfully, already slinging a salvaged backpack over my shoulder. You know, find fresh supplies, maybe some bread that isn't older than me. You're not serious, he said, but he still grabbed his machete. The streets were eerily quiet, too quiet. We picked our way past overturned cars, broken shop windows, and scorch marks that looked suspiciously like blast damage. This neighborhood's a death trap, Axel muttered. Your neighborhood is a death trap, I corrected, stepping over a melted bicycle frame. At least this one might have tomatoes. Tomatoes, he said flatly. Yes. Red, juicy, delicious tomatoes. You know, food. He shook his head like he was regretting every decision that led him to me. Which was funny because he was the one who told me to tag along. We reached what had once been a farmer's market. Half the stalls were smashed to splinters, but a few had crates of sealed goods, probably overlooked by less thorough scavengers. I was halfway through inspecting a box of canned peaches when Axel hissed, Dana. Incoming. 4 men in mismatched armor approached from the far side of the street. Not zombies, humans. Armed. And judging by the smirks, not here for a friendly chat. Scavenger gang? I asked quietly. Worse, he muttered. They like to take what's yours and make sure you can't come back for more. Oh. I smiled. Fun. The leader swaggered closer. That's some nice loot you've got there. Why don't you leave it and walk away? Axel's stance tightened. I could tell he was ready to fight, but this was a perfect time to test my blending in with Earth locals skills. So I stepped forward and said, Gentlemen, I'd be happy to give you something, if you can win a staring contest with me. They laughed. Mistake number 1. I let my irises shift into their Nivaran glow, a deep electric violet, and subtly projected a wave of psychic pressure. Their smiles faltered, knees buckling as I pushed just enough fear into their brains to make them sweat. The leader's face went pale. You're not. Still want the loot? I asked sweetly. They didn't answer. They just ran. Axel stared at me, mouth twitching. What the hell was that? Diplomacy, I said, tossing another can into the bag. That was not diplomacy. Worked, didn't it? We filled our bags without further trouble, unless you count the zombie that tried to crawl out from under a lettuce display. I blasted it back with a small energy pulse, only wobbling a little afterward. By the time we got back to the supermarket, Axel was still grumbling. You scared off one gang today. Word's gonna spread. People will either avoid us or come for us harder. I plopped the bag of peaches onto the counter. Let them. I've handled worse. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then stopped. His gaze dropped to my hands, still faintly glowing from earlier. What? I asked. Nothing, he said too quickly. But I caught it, the flicker of curiosity. And maybe admiration. I pretended not to notice. Because the truth was, for the first time I was starting to admire him too. Chapter 4: A Kiss for Distraction. There are many ways to stop a mind-sensitive predator. On Nivaran we have shields, sonic disruptors, and when all else fails, the short-circuit method. Unfortunately for Axel, the short-circuit method involves kissing someone. We were halfway through scavenging an old subway station when the air went cold. Not, oh, it's a draft cold. More like, the void of space is breathing down your neck cold. Axel froze, machete halfway out. Something's here. I felt it too. Not zombies. Not humans. Something tuned into the mental frequency around us. Mind feeder, I whispered. Low level but hungry. English, he muttered. Telepathic mutant. Defines you by reading your thoughts. The more you think, the easier you are to track. Great, he said, voice flat. How do we? The screech cut him off. It echoed through the tunnels, a high, bone-deep sound that made my head spin. The creature came skittering around the corner. Part human, part nightmare, with glassy eyes that darted everywhere at once. Axel tensed, ready to swing. But the thing was already locked onto him, its gaze flicking like it was peeling through his mind layer by layer. I didn't have time to explain. I did the only thing that would block its scan. I grabbed Axel by the front of his shirt, yanked him down and kissed him. It worked. The moment our lips met, the creature's mental probe hit a wall, blocked by the sudden overload of sensory input. It stumbled, shrieking, and turned its focus elsewhere. We stayed like that for exactly 3 seconds before Axel tore back, eyes wide like I'd just hit him with a frying pan. What the hell? No time, I said, spinning toward the mutant. Cover me. He did, cutting down the smaller zombies that swarmed in behind it while I charged up a pulse strong enough to fry the thing's psychic channels. The blast lit up the tunnel, and when the smoke cleared, the mutant was nothing but twitching limbs. Only then did Axel round on me. You kissed me, he accused, as if that was somehow worse than being eaten alive. It was strategic, I said. Strategic. It blocked the scan. On my planet, physical contact disrupts telepathic links. I was saving your life. His jaw worked soundlessly before he finally muttered, You could have warned me. There wasn't time, I said, suppressing a smirk. Besides, it wasn't that bad. His ears went red. Not that, he cut himself off, glaring at the ground. Let's just go. We didn't talk much on the way back. He walked ahead, machete in hand, all tense shoulders and unreadable silence. I followed, pretending not to notice the way his heartbeat had spiked after the kiss, or the fact that mine had too. The funny thing? I wasn't sure if it was because of the mutant, or because of him. Chapter 5: Secrets and Spilled Beans. By now, Axel had stopped asking where I went during my walks. Probably because every time he did, I'd give him some sarcastic answer about finding a space station or having tea with alien royalty. Still, I could feel his suspicion growing. And tonight I finally got caught. I'd slipped up to the supermarket roof just before dawn, letting the cool light soak into my skin. Nivaran cells are solar conductive. We recharge best under our home sun's spectrum, but Earth's star still worked, barely. Hovering about 3 feet above the rooftop, I held the energy in my palms, pulling it through my veins until the dull ache of exhaustion eased. My hair floated around me from the static and a faint glow pulsed at my fingertips. Wait, just 10 more seconds, I whispered to myself. Or you could explain what the hell you're doing, a voice said behind me. I dropped like a rock. Axel. I hissed, spinning around. Don't sneak up on people during their highly sensitive energy absorption rituals. He crossed his arms. You were floating. And glowing. That's not normal. I hesitated. I could lie, but something in his face, half suspicion, half genuine concern, made me stop. Fine, I said, landing properly on the roof. I'm not from here. I'm from a planet called Nivaran. I'm a soldier. My teleporter glitched and now I'm stuck on Earth. Happy. He didn't even blink. Yeah, I figured you weren't exactly local. I frowned. That's it? No disbelief? No, aliens aren't real speech. He looked away toward the city skyline. Zombies happened, Dana. If that's possible, I'm not gonna lose my mind over an alien with purple eyes. For some reason that hit harder than I expected. We ended up sitting on the roof as the sky shifted from gray to pale gold. Axel told me about his sister, how she'd been one of the first infected and how he'd failed to save her. His voice stayed even, but I could feel the weight behind every word. On Nivaran we're trained to keep emotions in check, but something in me cracked. I told him about my squad, how we'd fought through 3 solar systems and still lost most of our unit in a single ambush. We didn't say anything for a while after that. The city below groaned and hissed like a sleeping beast. Then, of course, the zombies picked that exact moment to attack. A dozen of them stumbled out from a collapsed building nearby, their growls carrying on the wind. Axel jumped to his feet, pulling me up beside him. We can make it back to the door before. I blasted the nearest ones before he could finish. He fell into step beside me, cutting down any that got too close. We moved like we'd been fighting together for years, covering each other's blind spots without even thinking about it. When the last one fell, we were both breathing hard. You're insane, he said. Thanks, I said, smiling despite the sweat on my forehead. Back inside, he tossed me a bottle of water and muttered, Don't disappear on me again. I raised a brow. Because you'd miss me? His mouth twitched like he was holding back a comeback. Because trouble follows you. And I'm stuck dealing with it. Sure. That's what he wanted me to think. But the way his eyes lingered a moment too long said otherwise. Chapter 6, The Great Rescue Plan. It started with Axel pacing like a caged animal, which for him meant 3 laps across the supermarket floor and exactly 2 sighs before I asked, Okay, what's eating you? He didn't look at me. An old friend. He's trapped in one of the quarantine zones. Haven't been able to reach him since the last sweep. Quarantine zone, I repeated. You mean one of those walled-off, zombie-infested death pits? Yeah, he said, grim. I grinned. Perfect. Let's go. His head snapped toward me. No. It's too dangerous. I shrugged. So is living in a supermarket with booby traps made from kitchen utensils, but here you are. He narrowed his eyes. Dana. Look, I said, leaning against the counter. You know those death pits? I've fought worse. I have powers. I have experience. And most importantly, I have 0 sense of self-preservation. That's not comforting, he muttered. But by nightfall we were loading gear into his beat-up pickup truck. The drive to the quarantine zone was quiet. Too quiet except for me humming an old Nivaran marching tune. What is that? Axel finally asked. War song. Helps with focus. Sounds cheerful for a war song. Yeah, well, ours involve more dance breaks, I said. Really boosts morale. He gave me that look again, the one halfway between disbelief and the urge to laugh but refusing to. The zone was worse than I expected. High fences topped with barbed wire, burned-out vehicles, and the faint stench of rot that no helmet filter could block. We slipped inside through a hole in the fence Axel clearly hadn't just found. He'd used it before. Your friend lives in here? I whispered. Not by choice, he replied. It took less than 5 minutes for trouble to find us. A small pack of runners, faster than the usual zombies, came barreling down the street. Axel swung his machete while I blasted the ones on the edges, careful not to drain too much power. When the last one fell, Axel shot me a look. Still think this was a good idea? Yes, I said, grinning. Because we're winning. We found his friend holed up in the wreckage of an old diner, injured but alive. The man, Liam, looked Axel over, then me, and said, You've upgraded your company. Axel didn't answer, but I caught the flicker of a smirk before he helped Leon to his feet. Getting back out wasn't easy. A horde had gathered near the fence, forcing us to cut through side streets and rooftops. At one point, Axel nearly fell through a weakened roof beam, and without thinking, I grabbed him by the waist and hauled him up with one hand. He blinked down at me. "You're way too strong for your size." "Flattery won't get you out of cardio," I said, pulling him along. By the time we reached the truck, the sky was bleeding orange. Leon was safe in the back seat, and Axel was still trying to figure out how I'd single-handedly lifted him like a sack of grain. When we were finally behind the supermarket's reinforced doors again, Axel dropped his gear, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Thanks." Just that. One word, but it felt heavier than any medal I'd ever gotten. I gave him a lopsided smile. "Don't mention it. Literally. Ever. I have a reputation to maintain." He rolled his eyes, but I caught the faintest trace of relief in his posture, and something warmer I couldn't quite name. Chapter 7, Confessions Interrupted. It started with soup. Or more accurately, with me burning the soup. In my defense, earth stoves are primitive and don't automatically adjust to optimal molecular vibration like Nivaran cookers. Axel walked in just as I was fanning smoke away from the pot with a cutting board. "You're trying to kill us with food now?" he said, stepping around me to open the window. "It's a culinary experiment," I replied. "The smoke adds flavor." "Yeah, the flavor of regret." We sat down anyway. Me with my disaster soup, him with a can of something suspiciously edible. And for the first time in a while, the silence between us wasn't awkward. He looked tired. Not the usual survivalist tired, but something softer, like he'd finally let his guard down. "Dana," he said, setting his fork down. "About what happened yesterday." My stomach tightened. This was it. The conversation. The one where he either admits he doesn't hate me, or admits he really doesn't hate me. But of course the universe hates perfect timing. The wall shook. Then it shook again. "What the hell?" Axel started, but the next crash drowned him out. I bolted for the rooftop ladder, heart pounding. When I reached the top, I saw it, an oversized zombie. Not just big. Huge. Easily twice the size of the others, with arms like wrecking balls and a chest covered in makeshift armor ripped from cars. "Oh, that's new," I muttered. Axel joined me, eyes narrowing. "How do we kill it?" "With a small tank," I said, "or a lot of improvisation." The next 10 minutes were a blur of chaos. We lured the thing into the alley, used old propane tanks as explosives, and, at one point, Axel almost got flattened before I shoved him into a dumpster. He came up covered in what I really hope was just garbage juice. "You're lucky you're cute," I said without thinking. His eyes widened, but before he could say anything, the mutant let out a roar that rattled my bones. We finally brought it down with a combined attack. My energy blast to the knees, his machete to the skull. When it was over, we stood there breathing hard. My chest was still buzzing from the fight, and maybe from the way he was looking at me. "Dana, he started again. And then Leon's voice echoed from the supermarket door. "Hey, you guys okay?" Because the noise scared the crap out of me. Axel's jaw tightened. "Later," he muttered. I just smirked. Sure. Later. But something told me that when later finally came, it was going to change everything. Chapter 8. The night we almost died laughing. It was supposed to be simple. Grab supplies from the abandoned pharmacy, get back before dark, don't make any noise. Naturally, we failed all 3 steps before we'd even reached the front door. First, Axel tripped over a garden gnome. Yes, a garden gnome. It was lying in the middle of the street for no reason, and when he went down, he took me with him. We ended up in a tangle of limbs, staring at each other in shock before both bursting into laughter. "Smooth," I said, brushing dirt off my jacket. "You were the one walking too close," he shot back. Inside the pharmacy, things were quiet at first. Axel was checking shelves for antibiotics while I scanned for anything edible. That's when I found it. A dusty plastic toy sword, complete with flashing lights and sound effects. I pressed the button and it made the most ridiculous whoosh noise I'd ever heard. "Dana," Axel warned, "put that down." "Absolutely not," I said, swinging it through the air like a battle-hardened warrior of the candy aisle. Unfortunately, the batteries still worked. Loudly. The noise brought 3 zombies shambling from the back room. Axel groaned, I grinned, and the toy sword was quickly replaced by a very real metal pipe. We cleared them out fast, but in the scuffle I knocked over an entire display of empty pill bottles. They clattered across the floor like an endless applause for our terrible stealth. Axel shot me a look that said, "I told you so." On our way out, I spotted something in the corner. A dust-covered karaoke machine. Now I should have ignored it. Instead, I plugged it into the emergency battery on my belt. A blaring, off-key rendition of an old Earth pop song filled the street. Axel just stared at me. "You're unbelievable." "You're smiling," I pointed out. "That's because I'm imagining leaving you here," he said. But he didn't stop me. We made it back to the supermarket with only minor scrapes, a bag full of meds and, yes, the karaoke machine strapped to my back. That night, while Leon was asleep, Axel and I sat on the roof with a single microphone between us, singing horribly into the empty city. We laughed until my sides hurt, until the weight of the apocalypse faded for a little while. And somewhere between his deep, terrible attempt at harmonizing and my tears of laughter, I realized, if we could survive this together, maybe we could survive anything. Chapter 9. When the Sky Fell. It started with a sound I hadn't heard since leaving Nivaran. A deep, thrumming hum that made the air itself vibrate. I froze on the rooftop halfway through my morning patrol. That sound didn't belong to Earth. Axel climbed up behind me. "What's wrong?" "Listen," I said. He frowned, scanning the empty streets. "I don't hear." Then the clouds split. A massive shadow rippled across the city and a shape emerged, sleek, metallic, and all too familiar. A Nivaran recon ship. For a split second, relief flooded me. My people had found me. I could go home. Then I saw the weapon ports glowing. They weren't here for a rescue. They were here for eradication. "What is that?" Axel demanded. "I passed," I said, my throat tight. "And your problem now." The ship unleashed its first shot. An energy beam that vaporized a block of buildings in an instant. Zombies scattered. Fires roared to life. The sky turned a sickly green from the weapon's discharge. "They think this planet's beyond saving," I said, my voice barely audible over the chaos. "Standard protocol is to cleanse it." Axel grabbed my arm. "Then stop them. It's not that simple. They'll see me as compromised. If I approach, they'll shoot me too." His grip tightened. "Dana, if you can't stop them, we're dead. Everyone's dead." I hated that he was right. The rest of the day was a blur. Gathering survivors, leading them through side streets, avoiding both zombies and aerial patrol sweeps. Leon got hit by falling debris. Axel carried him for 3 blocks without slowing down. I wanted to yell at him for risking himself, but I couldn't. Somewhere between hiding in a collapsed subway tunnel and sprinting across a burning street, Axel grabbed my hand. Not in the "don't get lost" way. More like, "if we die together." By nightfall, the recon ship was still circling, scanning, firing occasionally. On the roof, Axel finally said, "You have to go up there." I stared at him. "You're asking me to walk into the ship of people who think I'm a traitor." "I'm asking you to save this planet," he said, his voice steady. "And maybe, come back." That last part was quieter, almost lost in the wind. I didn't answer right away. Because I wanted to promise him I'd come back. But Nivaran ships didn't exactly have round-trip tickets for deserters. I wasn't ready to let go. Not of him. Not yet. "I'll figure something out," I said finally. And when he looked at me, really looked, I knew that whatever happened next, neither of us would ever be the same. Chapter 10, The Last Choice. I didn't tell Axel goodbye. Not because I thought I'd jinx it, but because if I said it, I might not leave at all. Instead, I left him sleeping on the roof, his jacket pulled tight around his shoulders, and headed for the signal point I'd calculated. If the Nivaran recon ship was going to notice me, it would be here. An open stretch of road with nothing to block their scans. The hum grew louder, heat rippling through the air as the ship descended. My chest tightened. It looked exactly like the ones I'd trained in, right down to the scorch marks on the hull from atmospheric entry. The side hatch opened and a squad of armored soldiers stepped out, weapons raised. Dana Eriks, their leader called, voice echoing through a translator unit. "By order of the Nivaran High Command, you are to be taken into custody for contamination and dereliction of duty." "Nice to see you too," I muttered. I didn't flinch. "You don't have to cleanse this planet," I said, raising my voice. "There are survivors. They're fighting. They can rebuild." "Not our concern," the leader replied. "Orders are absolute." "Then change the orders," I shot back. or you'll have to go through me. They hesitated, just long enough for me to tap into my full power for the first time since arriving here. The air shimmered, my body thrumming with energy, and the ground cracked under my feet. Before the situation could explode, literally, a familiar voice rang out behind me. Dana. Of course he'd followed me. Of course he couldn't just stay safe. You're insane, I hissed as he came to stand beside me. Yeah, but you like that, he said, giving me a look that almost made me forget we were seconds away from being vaporized. The leader's visor tilted. This human means something to you. Yes, I said without hesitation. That was the moment I knew. Not just about Axel but about myself. I didn't want to go back to Nivaran. Not if it meant leaving him. So I made my choice. I resign, I told the soldiers. Effective immediately. They didn't take it well. Weapons powered up. Axel tensed beside me but I grabbed his hand. On 3, I whispered. We moved together. Me unleashing a blinding energy wave that sent the soldiers scrambling, him pulling me toward the cover of a wrecked building. By the time they regrouped we were gone. That night the recon ship left orbit. Maybe they'd be back. Maybe they'd send someone worse. But for now Earth was still here. We sat on the roof watching the stars. So, Axel said, you really gave up your whole space life for me? I smiled. Don't get too full of yourself. I also like Earth snacks. He laughed, but there was something softer in his eyes when he leaned closer. You know, he said, you're not the only one who made a choice today. And then he kissed me. Finally. The world was still broken. The zombies were still out there. The future was still uncertain. But for the first time since I landed on this doomed planet, I didn't feel alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough too. Bonus chapter: Date night in the end times. There are many ways to spend an evening in the apocalypse. Fending off zombies. Scavenging for food. Repairing the roof for the 10th time because wind plus rusty sheet metal equals disaster. But Axel had another idea. A date, he said, handing me a blindfold. I stared at him. Is this the part where you finally reveal you're secretly evil and I'm walking into a trap? Just put it on, he said, smirking. He led me through the city with surprising ease, considering the cracked streets and occasional shambling corpse we had to avoid. At one point I heard him swing his machete and mutter, "Nothing to see here," like we were in some weird romantic comedy/horror movie. When we stopped he took off the blindfold. We were on the roof of a high-rise I'd never been to before, overlooking the city. The fires had burned out, the streets were quiet, and the sunset painted everything in shades of gold and crimson. There was a blanket spread out, a small battery-powered lamp, and, my favorite part, a scavenged box of assorted snacks. You brought me expired gummy worms, I said, holding up the packet. They're only slightly stale, he replied. Adds texture. We sat and ate, watching the skyline fade into night. He'd even rigged the lamp to glow warm instead of its usual harsh white. This is nice, I admitted. For a guy who trips over garden gnomes. He gave me a side look. I can still push you off this roof, you know. For a while we didn't talk. We just listened to the distant wind and the faint, eerie hum of a world that wasn't what it used to be. Then Axel cleared his throat. So, I've been thinking. That's dangerous, I teased. Shut up. I mean, we could keep moving, try to find other survivors. Or, we could start building something here. Like a base. Like a home, he said softly. That word hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so long running, on Nivaran here on Earth, that the idea of staying somewhere almost felt foreign. But looking at him, at the blanket, the snacks, the ridiculous effort he'd put into making this night happen, I realized I didn't hate the idea. Hey, I said. Home. He smiled, leaned in and kissed me again. And for once the apocalypse didn't feel so big.